له الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله يحب المتقين صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات. So on the discussion of reforming ourselves, the place we reached yesterday and the point we reached yesterday was talking about how to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through ourselves, reflecting, reforming ourselves, improving ourselves, bettering ourselves to the point where we can reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reach an understanding of Him. And that means something different for every person. Each and every individual will understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a different way, to a different level, to a different capacity. And an example of that is during the time of our Imam, many of the people would come to the Imam and they would say to him, prove to me your God exists. So there's a time where a man comes to the Imam and he goes, prove to me that your God, this God that you speak of, exists. So the Imam, he looks at the guy and he says, okay, tell me, have you ever seen an egg? The man goes, yeah, I've seen an egg. And then the Imam tells him, okay, so if I describe an egg to you, will you be able to verify that what I'm saying is correct? The man says, yeah. Obviously, the way that they spoke in those days was slightly different to how we speak now. So the Imam says, have you seen it's got a hard shell, a hard exterior? And the man says, yeah, I've seen an egg has a hard exterior. And then the Imam says, have you seen there's a layer of silver inside? That's what we would call the egg whites. The man says, yeah, I've seen it has this layer of silver inside. And then the Imam says, have you seen there's a layer of gold inside the silver? And that would be the egg yolk. The man says, yeah, I've seen there's a layer of gold inside the layer of silver. So the Imam says, tell me, what's the point of that hard shell on the outside? The man says, to protect what's on the inside, so nothing from outside can get in. The Imam says, yeah, so you understand nothing from the outside can get in because of that shell. The man says, yeah, I understand. So the Imam looks at him and then he says, so tell me, how is it possible that if nothing can get inside, that a chick can come out from inside? From a layer of gold and silver, a chick can come out on the inside. The man's perplexed. He goes, explain it to me. The Imam says, there has to be some external force. Something else, something bigger than what we see physically, because physically you can see nothing goes in, but something comes out. So surely there's something more than just what we see physically. The man's amazed. He's astounded. He's like, wow. He accepts Islam. He's like, you know what? I believe it. Your God exists. What you're talking about, that's the truth. I believe it. Another point, a man comes to the Imam and he tries to question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, tell me, if your God is as great as you say he is, then can he fit this whole entire world into an egg? Without making the world smaller or the egg any bigger, can he fit the whole entire world into an egg? The man goes, yes, of course he can. The Imam goes, yes, of course he can. The man looks at him perplexed. He goes, how? The Imam says, tell me, can you see the world? He says, yes, I can see the world around me, everything. The Imam goes, tell me, are your eyes bigger than an egg? The man goes, no, an egg's bigger than my eyes. So he says, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can make the whole world fit inside your eyes, why could he not make it fit inside an egg? So for that man, he listens to this and he thinks, you know what? What this man, what the Imam is saying, it's true, it's correct. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is as powerful as he says. And then there's another point where a man comes to the Imam and he says the same thing. He says, Ya Imam, prove to me your God exists. So the Imam, he looks at him and he goes, what's your name? The man sits there in silence, looks up. He says, tell me, how do I become a Muslim? He recites the kalmah, the shahada, and leaves. All around the Imam, his companions were sat there and they look at him, they go, Ya Imam, what just happened? The Imam goes, he came with a question, I answered his question, he left. They go, look, no, we got that bit. We saw him come, we saw him ask the question, we saw him accept Islam, we saw him leave, but how? The Imam goes, I answered the question that he had. They go, yeah, Imam, we saw you. All you did was ask his name and nothing else. The Imam goes, that man's name was Abdullah. Abdullah means servant of Allah, slave of Allah. When he heard it back to himself, when he thought about his name while he was thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it made him realize, you know what, there is some kind of purpose to me. If I'm Abdullah, I'm a servant of something, there's some kind of reason for my existence, and that reason must be God. See, we might look at that and think, well, that's so simple. That doesn't prove God to you. That's just your name. That's what your parents named you. That doesn't mean anything. But for that man, that was enough. That was his capability of understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For another man, it's simply understanding how a chick comes out of an egg. For another man, it's understanding the impossibility of how the entire world can fit into something so small as an egg. See, for each and every one of us, our capacity to understand Allah will be different. Our capacity to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be different. That's what sets the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the A'imma, the Prophets apart from us. If they wanted to sin, if they wanted to go against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have the power in their body and hands to do it just the same way that we do. But because they have a greater understanding, a greater recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they don't want to do that. They don't wish to go towards that. We see this where a man comes to our 8th Imam, Imam Ali Raza alayhi salatu wassalam. And he says to him, Ya Imam, explain to me your isma, explain to me why you don't sin, why you don't go against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ever. For us, we have these desires that make us want to go against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're built into each and every one of us. They're also built into the A'imma and the Anbiya, because these are innate desires that we have, right? Every person needs to eat. Every person needs to drink something. In the same way, the desires we have are built into us. It's about controlling them. So the man asked the Imam, why is it that you never fall prey to these desires? Why is it that you never do anything haram? The Imam says, you see this dirt on the floor? The man says, yes. The Imam says, pick some of that up and eat it. The man looks at the Imam like, Imam, I'd rather not do that. The Imam looks at me and goes, you see these sins? The same way you look at that dirt is the same way we see those sins. It's not because I'm restricted. It's not because I can't. It's because it's not attractive to me to do something that goes against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your connection with Allah, that's the connection you're looking for. That's the connection you want. And I go back to the verse of the Holy Quran, which I recited right at the start, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna Allah yuhibbul muttaqin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the muttaqeen. Muttaqeen are people who have what's called taqwa. And often taqwa is translated or defined as fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'd say, is the wrong definition. Because it doesn't explain truly what taqwa is. It doesn't explain to us what it's meant to be. And we can see that in this verse. See, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He loves the muttaqeen, if you translate that fully according to this translation of fear of Allah, what you're saying is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who fear. He loves the people who are afraid of Him. So if you're afraid, then He'll love you. But that's not how love works. You're not meant to love someone because they're afraid of you. And if you are, then you need help. You're meant to love someone because of the other emotions they have, the other connections you have. You don't love them out of fear. And if we go into the hadith, we see it even more clearly, where there's a hadith which is quite often narrated by Imam Ali alayhi salam. It was also said by Imam Musa Kadhim alayhi salatu wassalam. They're almost identical, except Imam Musa Kadhim's one, it goes on just a little bit. There's one extra sentence added on to the end. And it's a hadith that a lot of you will have heard. It's a hadith about the 3 types of worshippers. We're told there's 3 types of worshippers. The first is the one who is like a businessman. He's told that if he worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he'll get heaven. So he thinks, you know what, that's a fair trade-off. I read my namaz, I get palaces in heaven. Sounds like a fair deal, I'll do it. The second is the one who is afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's heard, you don't read namaz, there's a blaring fire waiting for you. He's heard of the terrors and the tortures of the Day of Judgment. And he's decided, you know what, in order to avoid that, I'll pray, that's fine. That's the fear of the one who is afraid. And the third one is the one who worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of love and out of recognition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worthy of being worshipped. That's the one who sees the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sees everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created and done for him, and decides, you know what, I'm going to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by doing ibadah, by worshipping. Imam Musa Kadhim, he tells us this third one, that's the best of worship. That's the best worshipper, the one who does it out of love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of recognition of Him. But see, if the Quran is telling us that Allah loves those who are afraid of Him, and the hadith is telling us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually, He loves those who love Him even more, then which one do we accept? Now the Quran is afdal. The Quran is the absolute source of truth. If any hadith, and I'll tell you this for a fact, if any hadith contradicts what the Quran says, that hadith is wrong. You can't accept that hadith. The Quran is the absolute truth. So what do we realize here? That this taqwa that we're talking about, it's not just fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No. There's a further element, a further step to it that we miss out on. And what that is what are we afraid of? When I say I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, am I afraid of His wrath? Am I afraid of His fire? Am I afraid of His power? What am I afraid of? See, what I'm meant to be afraid of isn't the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this instance. Because that fear, although it is valid, it's not incorrect. It's not what taqwa is. Taqwa isn't doing things because I'm afraid of the punishment of Allah. No. See, there's a difference, right? When you get in trouble with your parents, or when you get in trouble, I don't know, at work or at school or whatever, there's a big difference between two phrases. And this especially works for your parents, right? When your parents are angry at you and when they're disappointed with you. There's a big, big difference. Disappointment hurts a lot more. Why? Because anger speaks to the action that you did. I'm angry with what you did, but disappointment, I'm disappointed in you. Anger is to do with something that you've done, but disappointment is to do with the relationship I have with you. What I thought of you, who I thought you were. Disappointment means you've let me down in some way. That hurts a lot more. When we say we fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what we're really afraid of is we're afraid of disappointing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're afraid of letting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala down. See, we have to make sure that we recognize this. Because if you lead with that fear, then you don't get everything else that you're meant to in taqwa. But if you lead with love and that relationship, then you realize what the power of that love is. Because love and hate are two very different relationships. They're two very different emotions. There's a lot more in love than there is in hate. I'll give you an example. For instance, let's say I absolutely hate a boss, right? Hardy, rather. I don't know why I called you a boss. Let's say I absolutely hate Hardy. Now, let's say Mehdi also hates Hardy. Because I hate Hardy, that doesn't mean that I also have to hate Mehdi. That doesn't mean that I have to like Mehdi either. Normally, let's say, because I hate Hardy, I will also like the people that hate him. Because we have something in common, right? But that's not necessarily true. Again, I'll bring it back to the same thing I always bring it back to. I'm an Arsenal fan. I despise Tottenham with a passion. So do Chelsea, but I promise you I don't like them either. I promise you I don't like any other team that dislikes Tottenham either. Why? Because my relationship is one of hate there. I hate Tottenham. I hate that team with a passion. But that doesn't mean that I have any other feeling because of that towards another team. No. But here's the difference. If I love Arsenal, then that means I do hate Tottenham. If I love Arsenal, that means that when Arsenal are playing, I'm worried, I'm nervous. When Arsenal are doing well, I'm happy, I'm enjoying it. See, because of that love, now all these other emotions come into it. You love someone, you hate the things which are bad for them. You love someone, you're afraid of the things which are a danger to them. You enjoy the things that are good for them. You really, really encompass every other emotion when it comes from love. But when you start with hate, you don't get all the rest of it with it. When we talk about taqwa, we're not just talking about fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's anger. No, we're talking about that love and that relationship that we have for Him. And that love with it, it will bring within us a hatred for the things that He dislikes. It will bring within us a fear of anything that will damage my relationship with Him. It will bring with us happiness where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy. And that's the relationship we're looking for. That's what we're trying to achieve when we talk about taqwa. And when we're talking about reforming society, when we're talking about recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through ourselves, it's that relationship that takes us to Him. And there's a beautiful example, and I try to use it as often as I can. Recite aloud to Allah Muhammad wa ala. Allama Safi Haidar. He's a great scholar, and he came to our center in South London once, and he was talking about how to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you do things which you know are haram, you know you're not meant to do, you think, I'm not the best Muslim, how do I return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He put so beautifully how easy it is to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He told a story of when he was in his house. He was studying, and he described the layout of his house. He says, I've got my library here, and then I've got my bedroom through a few rooms. So he says he was in his bedroom, he was sitting there studying, and he needed to get a book from his library. So he went to the library and he walked through the room where his granddaughter was playing in her cot. She was only, not even a toddler, a baby. He walks through the room, gets the book, and on his way back, his granddaughter wanted him to pick her up and play with her. So she kind of just reached out to him. He went, picked her up, played with her, whatnot, put her down and carried on studying. Allah Mustafa heard, he says, I realized when I thought about that moment, how easy it is to return to Allah. He says, my granddaughter, she wanted to play with me, but she can't get up and walk over to me because she's only a baby. So what did she do? She raised her two little hands up and I went the rest of the distance. He says the exact same way. You want to return to Allah? You don't have to cover all this distance. Raise your two hands up in dua. Allah will come towards you Himself. It doesn't matter how far you go from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can always return back to Him. You can always get back to that point of reaching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's constantly waiting for you to return to Him. He constantly wants you to return to Him. And He tells us as well the rewards and the brilliance of those who return to Him. He says in Surah Al-A'raf, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَمَنِ اتَّقَى وَاصْلَحَ. And again, that's what we're talking about, Islah and Taqwa. وَمَنِ اتَّقَى وَاصْلَحَ. The one who has taqwa, he has that fear of damaging his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he does Islah. He reforms himself, improves himself, betters himself for that purpose. What does He give them? He says, وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ. There is nothing for them to be afraid of. Nothing for you to be afraid of so long as you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on your side. So long as you have joined Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ranks. So long as you have gone and you've made yourself a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is nothing for you to be afraid of. وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزُنُونَ. And there's nothing for them to grieve over. Why? Because you've achieved the ultimate goal. You've achieved the ultimate blessing. But to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that sense, to reach that connection with Him, you need two things. One is this love, this emotional side of it. How do we get that emotional aspect? See, emotion, it's not something that can be taught. I can't sit in a classroom and teach you emotion. I can't sit on a minbar and teach you emotion. No, emotion is something you feel. It's something you experience. It's something you go through. So what is it that you go through? First and foremost, you go through life. Life will have its ups, it will have its downs. It will have its difficulties, it will have its good moments. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says it Himself in the Holy Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. He alternates the good days and the bad days between the people. Some days you will have good days, some days you'll have bad days. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He alternates them. When you have good days and bad days, remember your Lord. Remember how you felt. The parents in the room, especially the mothers upstairs, they will understand this most. Often we turn to our parents when we need them. When things aren't going well, when we're upset, when we're sad, all of a sudden we might turn to our parents a bit more. But when things are good, you forget them. When things are good, you seem to forget the people who got you there. I myself am guilty of this at times. My mum says it all the time. When I go on holiday, I forget to message her. Whenever I go on holiday, I'm off, I'm enjoying myself. My mum says, you forgot about me. Like, Mum, I didn't forget about you. I was off on holiday, I was with my friends, I was doing my own thing. But no, in truth, I didn't message her, I forgot to. Because in the good times, we forget. But when the difficult time comes, and for those of you who've been through exam season, GCSEs or A-levels, go and check your school's prayer room. I promise you, it's never as packed as it is around exam season. You will see all of a sudden, when times are getting tough, everybody's on the musalla. I remember, there was a good friend of mine. We realized that there's something wrong in his life. Why? Because he started reading namaz. We saw him on the musalla, we're like, something's wrong, this isn't right. We turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when things get bad, but He's not there just for the bad. He's there for both the good and the bad. We have to learn to experience Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's when we get this emotion. And that emotion, it will take us to a point of what's called haqqul yaqeen, the absolute certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And haqqul yaqeen it's an incredible place to reach. Look, your yaqeen on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your iman, your faith, it will waver, it will go up and down. There's peaks and troughs. There'll be times where you feel super connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where even it's a minute past namaz time, all of a sudden you're thinking, when am I going to get to read? I'm busy right now. When am I going to be able to read? You have this, what you call ajali inside you. You have this kind of, this need, this want. And then there'll be times where namaz time comes round and you think, it's a lot of effort right now. I'm doing something else. Do I really have the energy? Do I really have the effort? Look, that happens. That's normal. Your iman, it comes in peaks and troughs as well. You have ups and downs in iman. That's how life is. That happens. In those moments, you have to stick it out and show your determination. That's when you read namaz, and those namazes are accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and loved by Him so much. Why? Because even when you weren't feeling some spiritual connection, even when you weren't feeling some amazing feeling, some amazing high on the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you still did it. You still remembered Him. See, haqqul yaqeen, it gets you to a point where you're at that high. And it's a beautiful feeling. And it's not simply a matter of your intellect recognizing. It's like we said, the classroom isn't enough. There's certain stages of yaqeen. I'll give you an example. So for instance, the first stage of yaqeen is when you've heard something. If you've heard something, you believe it. So for instance, the example that's often used is fire. Let's say for whatever reason, Mehdi, he's seen or he's heard from everyone that fire is cold. Everyone's told him fire is cold. But now he's believed that. That's fine. Fire is cold. Okay, I believe it. Now he's seen with his own two eyes, he's seen somebody get burned, right? He's seen somebody get burned and he's gone, hold on a second. No, fire's not cold, fire's hot. I've seen it. He got burned. I saw it with my own two eyes. See, hearing was the first level. Seeing is the second level. The second level of yaqeen is when you've seen it. Now he's going to be more convinced. But I tell you what, if enough of us tell him, no, that was just that one flame that was hot. Otherwise, fire's cold. Otherwise, fire isn't actually hot. He might come to believe it. If you present him with a good enough argument, or, you know, you spin your words well enough, he might believe it. He's like, okay, maybe it was just that one flame that was cold. That one flame was hot and all the rest of fires in the world, they're actually cold. Now he's still believing what he's heard over what he's seen. Then comes the third stage, which is experiencing. Somehow Mehdi's managed to burn himself. He's burnt himself, he's felt it. He's like, no, that was definitely hot. There's no way that was cold. It might happen once. You might still be able to convince him. Twice, maybe you'll convince him after that. 3, 4 times, however many, I don't know why he's burning himself so much, but no matter how many times it happens, that yaqeen, that certainty, it grows on each and every occasion. Each and every instance, all of a sudden, he's going to get to a point where it doesn't matter how many people stand in front of him and tell him, no, fire's cold. I'm telling you it's cold. I promise you it's cold. He's going to stand there and tell you, no, the whole world can stand against me. I know it's hot. I've felt it so many times. I know this fire's hot. He's not going to believe you. That's haqqul yaqeen, where nothing's changing your mind now. You've reached absolute certainty, and that comes from experience. You have to experience Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your everyday life. You have to experience Him in the world around you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there in every moment of your life. You have to experience Him. Look out for Him. Every moment you go through in life, think to yourself, what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling me here? What is He teaching me here? When you go out onto the roads, look at the trees, look at the skies, look at everything around you. Recognize the magnificence and the brilliance of your Lord, the one who will make the same trees and plants every single year die in the autumn, come back to life in the spring. The one who controls every ant to every elephant, every ocean to every mountain, the skies, the heavens, the earth, everything in between it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who controls all of that. When He tells you, I'm talking to you, listen to Him. The Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who calls to you to talk to Him, spend time talking to Him. Because recognize the majesty of Allah and recognize your relationship with Him as well. If I tell you that I know the Queen, you're going to tell me, who are you? Why would you know the Queen? But when I tell you I know Rabbul Alameen, and Rabbul Alameen knows me even better, believe that. Like I say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every leaf, every grain of sand, every tree, every plant, every bird, every creature, every animal, all turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But 5 times a day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I want to listen to you. 5 times a day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I want to hear what you have to say. And it's not just the words of namaz that are prescribed. And in fact, the words of namaz, they're a lot less set in stone than we think they are. Oftentimes we think it's just this set thing that I have to say. No, you can change some of those words. The mafhum, the meaning generally should stay the same, but you can change the words. Your qunut can be in any language you want. Even more so, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has told us through the imams and through the Ahlul Bayt that after your namaz, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants you to do a dua. He wants you to ask for something. What are we learning here? What are we seeing? Namaz isn't just about me getting up and doing a few stretches up and down. No, namaz is me talking to Allah. It's not just the words that I'm saying, but the dua I make after it. Telling Allah, oh Allah, I need this, I want this, this is what I'm after, Ya Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the whole world talking to him, but you're the one he wants to listen to. You're the one he's waiting on every day when he calls to you to read your salah. That's the relationship we should have with Allah. That's the relationship he has with us. The question is, are we reciprocating? Are we reaching back? Look into your experiences and find your Lord in every single moment. Not just your salah, but when you're walking out and about, when you're with your friends, when you're with your family, when you're alone. In every moment, look for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you in that moment. What is he teaching you in that moment? Where can you see the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that moment? This is one way in which we can experience Allah to reach haqqul yaqeen. The second way is what? Through the experiences of others. The experiences of others, especially the ones that evoke emotion, those bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's no experience that invokes emotion more than the faza'il and the masa'ib of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Especially the masa'ib. When you cry, that's your heart talking now. When you cry, that's your emotions and your feelings talking now. And if you can't cry, simply putting your head down, putting yourself into a state of grief, that is your emotions talking. And it's those emotions that we're looking for to reach that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to reach that greater level of taqwa, to reach that greater level of love with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's these masa'ib that take us back to him. The remembrance of the tragedies that take us back to our Lord. And in these nights, there's no greater tragedy than the tragedy of what happened to Abu Abdullah and his family. It was just a few days before they reached Karbala. Abu Abdullah, he's traveling through the desert. When Abu Fadl Abbas, he rushes over to him. He says, "My Mawla, there is a murmur amongst all the rest of the soldiers. They're saying they can see something in the distance." Abu Abdullah, he turns, he says, "What is it that they see?" They stand and they look out into the distance. One of them says, "I think I see some trees." One of them says, "I agree, I think there's palm trees in the distance. We should go towards there, maybe there's some shade." Abu Abdullah, he turns to Abu Fadl Abbas. He says, "Abbas, do you see what I see?" Abbas looks at his master. He says, "Mawla, I see the same thing." He says, "Those aren't palm trees in the distance. That is the flags of an army approaching us." He says, "We should not go towards them. Instead, Abbas, get ready. Secure the women and children. Abbas, tell the men to get ready. There is an army approaching us. Surely they are not here to help us." As they stand and watch the armies of Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi approach, they get closer and closer. Some of the men go to protect the women. Some of them go to protect the Imam. Now they stand and they wait as Hurr's army approaches Imam Hussein's. Hurr's army approaches Imam Hussein's and they surround them from all sides. Hurr comes to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He approaches him. He says, "Ya Abu Abdullah, in this moment I've been told that I have to take you captive. In this moment I've been told that from now on you will go where I tell you to. These are my orders, these are my instructions." Abu Abdullah, he looks at Hurr and he says, "Hurr, what are you waiting for? What is it you wish to do?" He tells Imam Hussein, "We will wait here for a short while and then we will continue on our journey together." As they're waiting there, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he sat on a seat and he's looking around him at the army of Hurr, the army that's been sent to capture Abu Abdullah. He sees the horses are jumping up and down constantly. None of the horses will stand still. The horses are moving, the soldiers are trembling. Abu Abdullah, he turns to Hurr, he says, "Hurr, what's the matter? What's up with your soldiers? Why are they all trembling like this?" He says, "Ya Abu Abdullah, it's the desert sun, the heat here, they can't bear it. My soldiers, they haven't had water for a while, their mushks, they've run dry." Imam Hussein turns to Abbas, he says, "Abbas, go, give them our water. Go give them the water that we have for ourselves." They go, they give the water. Abbas, he goes one by one, handing water to each of the soldiers of Hurr's army. Then Imam Hussein turns his attention back to the horses. He says, "Hurr, what is the matter with your horses? Why do they keep jumping up and down?" Hurr says, "They have metal hooves on their feet. As the sand boils under the desert sun, their hooves begin to burn." Hussein turns to Abbas. He says, "Abbas, go and give water for the horses." Water poured over the hooves of Hurr's army's horses. But now Abu Abdullah, he sees there is one soldier in the army of Hurr. Every time he goes to take some water, his hands tremble so much that he cannot take the water into his mouth. It keeps spilling from his hands. Hussein, he's watching him from a distance. He's watching him and watching him, but the heart of Hussein cannot bear the thirst of another. He stands up himself. He walks over. Hussein takes the water in his hands. He gives the man the water from his own two hands. But Ya Aba Abdullah, what happened to that water? What happened to this thirst? Ya Aba Abdullah, in just a few days, Sakina will come to you. She will say, I don't ask for myself, but the children have said, can Abul Fadl Abbas go and bring water for us? The thirst has gotten to its peak. But Abu Abdullah cannot see this happen to another. He turns, he gets ready now. The time for Salah comes. Namaz is read in that desert. And at this point, Abu Abdullah, he begins getting ready to leave. The women and children are prepared. Imam Hussein, he begins getting ready to leave. Leaving Hur's army is what he wishes to do. But as he does, Hur remembers his orders. He's been told that Hussein must not leave you. Wherever you wish to go, Hussein must go there. So what does Hur do? He approaches Abu Abdullah. Imam Hussein sat atop his Zuljanah. Imam Hussein ushers for Zuljanah to move. Hur grabs the reins of Zuljanah. He looks into the eyes of Imam Hussein with anger. He tells him, no, Hussein, you will not go. Hur will take you wherever it is that you wish to go now. Now you are under my captivity. Abu Abdullah, in that moment, he looks at Hur. He says to him, Thaqulatka ummi ya Hur. May your mother weep over you, O Hur. It was an insult in the days of Arab. Now, Hur looks at Imam Hussein and what does he say? He says, you said this about my mother. What can I do? I'd say the same to you, but your mother is Sayyida Zahra. Your mother is the daughter of Rasulullah. I could not reply to you the same way you spoke to me. Now, the days pass. Abu Abdullah, he reaches Karbala alongside the armies of Hur. The days go on. From the 7th of Muharram, the water in the camps of Abu Abdullah finishes. Hur consistently is listening out to the screams coming from the camps of Abu Abdullah. The 9th of Muharram comes. The 9th of Muharram goes. That night, there comes a moment where they laid out the dastakhan. They prepared the food and laid it out in the tent of Hazrat Hur so that he could eat, so that he could have his dinner. They came to call Hazrat Hur, who was sat outside his tent, looking out towards Imam Hussein alayhi salam's tents and his army's tents. Hazrat Hur's servant, he went to him and he says to him, O master, the food is prepared and it is ready in the tent for you. But Hur did not respond. The servant goes, he comes back a few times, but again Hur does not respond. At one point, Hazrat Hur's son comes forward and he says to him, Father, the food is almost cold. Everyone is waiting for you to come and eat. Why do you sit out here alone? Hazrat Hur, he turns to his son. He says, come sit where I am sat. Sit next to me. Ali ibn Hur, the son of Hazrat Hur, he comes. He sits with his father. He says, look over there. They both look towards the camps of Imam Hussein. Hur turns to his son. He says, tell me, can you hear anything? Hazrat Hur's son, Ali ibn Hur, he looks down. He says, my father, I can hear what you hear. Hur says, say it. Tell me, what can you hear? He says, I hear the cries of Al-Atash. I hear Hussein's children crying that they are thirsty. I hear them crying, Father, but what can we do? What shall I do in this moment? Come and eat. We are all waiting. Hur looks at him. He says, I cannot. In all this time, Hur's eyes are fixed out towards the camps of Imam Hussein. Ali ibn Hur, he looks at his father, he says, tell me, what is it that you are looking at? What do you keep looking over? Hur turns to his son, he says, I am looking out and in front of me, I see on one side the hellfire, and on the other side I see paradise. He turns, he gets his servant to prepare his things. He goes to Umar Sa'ad, he says to him, O son of Sa'ad, tell me, will there actually be a war? Will you actually attack the armies of Hussein? Umar ibn Sa'ad, he says, tomorrow there will be a war unlike anything you have seen. He says it with pride, with arrogance. He says this war will go down in history. Now Hur's mind is made up. Now Hur's mind is decided for him. He goes, all his things that are ready, he gathers them. He mounts his horse and he begins to leave. As he begins to leave, his son comes behind him. Ali ibn Hur, he looks at his father. He says, tell me, father, where are you going? He says, my son, I told you I was looking between heaven and hell. I am going to paradise now. Ali ibn Hur, he says, will you go to paradise without me? Hur prepares his son. They both begin riding out towards the armies of Imam Hussein's tents. But before they reach there, Hur turns to his son. He dismounts from his horse. He hands his son some rope. He says, tie my hands behind my back. He hands his son a blindfold. He says, cover my eyes. Now, Hur alayhi salam, he mounts his horse, but his son is confused. He asks him why. He says, my son, do you not realize what we did? It is because of us that Hussein is here surrounded by armies. It is because of us that Hussein's children have no water. How can I approach Hussein as a free man? I will approach him as a slave and beg him for forgiveness. Hur, as he gets nearer and nearer, he sees somebody riding out towards him. He sees somebody rushing towards him. He turns to his son. He says, who is it that I can hear coming? He is blindfolded. He can only hear. He says, tell me, who is it that I can hear coming? Ali ibn Hur, with fear in his voice, trembling, he says, my father, Abbas and Akbar are coming towards us. Hur throws himself from his horse to the ground. He calls out, we have not come to attack. We have come to ask for forgiveness. The reply comes from Abbas. Hur, I too have not come to attack you. Your Mawla Hussein has sent me to welcome you with open arms. Hur's tears begin to flow. He reaches Abu Abdullah. He turns to Mawla Hussein. He says, Mawla Hussein, tell me, will you forgive me? Mawla Hussein, tell me, have I been forgiven for my crime? Hussein says, Hur, your forgiveness is such that on the day of Qiyamah, Zahra herself will make sure you enter heaven. Hur then turns, he says, Mawla, I have forgiveness from you, but what of your sisters? What of Zainab and Kulthum? Hur goes, he stands outside the tents of Sayyidah Zainab. He calls out, Assalamu alayki ya bint Ali. He calls out, my salams on you, O daughter of Ali. Sayyidah Zainab, she returns the call. She tells Hur, you are forgiven. Hur, you are forgiven for your crime. Now, the day of Ashura dawns. The companions of Imam Hussein are getting ready for battle. Hur approaches Imam Hussein. He says, my master, I beg of you, it is my fault you are here. Let me give my life. Let me go out to the battle. Imam Hussein looks at him and he says, Hur, I cannot let you go. My Mawla, why? Why can you not let Hur go to battle? He is a warrior. He was a commander on the other side of the army. Why can you not let him go? Hussein looks at Hur. He says, Hur, I can't let you go. You are my guest. I am of a family of adab, of akhlaq. It is against akhlaq that you have a guest come to visit you and you do not offer them anything to eat or drink. Hur, how can I let you leave before I have given you something to eat or drink? Hur, with tears in his eyes, he says, my master, it is my own fault. How can Hur drink something when Sakina is still thirsty? How can Hur drink when your children have not eaten? Hur too is hungry. Last night he left his dinner. He left without eating or drinking. He too is hungry and thirsty, but he's not as thirsty as Asghar. He is not as thirsty as Sakina. He is not as thirsty as Baqir, and he knows this. He begs his master, let me go to the battlefield. Let me give my life. Imam Hussein, he accepts. He agrees. It is the tradition of the Arabs that a warrior will take on as much pain as he can before he drops, before he leaves this world, before he puts his sword away. In this tradition, it is the tradition that a soldier will send his children to fight before he goes to fight himself, so that they can bear the pain of their children before they give their life. Hur turns to his son, Ali, go fight your battle. Go give your life for Hussein. Ali, the son of Hur, rides out to the battlefield. Now he fights his battle. The call comes from the battlefield. My father, help me, I have fallen. Hur, he rushes out to the battlefield, rushes out to his son's aid. But when he gets to the body of Ali ibn Hur, what does he see? When he gets to the body of Ali ibn Hur, he sees Imam Hussein there with his son's head in his lap. Hur turns to his master. He says, Mawla Hussein, what is this? I am your servant. This is my son. How can a servant's son be guided by his master? How can a servant's son be taken care of by the master? Hussein turns to Hur. Hussein turns to Hur and he says, Hur, return to the tents. Hur, go back. Why? He says, Hur, it is not the place of a father to lift the body of his young son, but in just a few short hours, it will be Ali ibn al-Hussein, the broken back of Hussein, the blinded eyes of Hussein, and there will be nobody to lift the body of Ali Akbar. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين فسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. We raise our hands in dua and we pray to Allah Azza wa Jal. Oh Allah, in this holy month of Muharram, accept all our ibadat. Oh Allah, for all those around the world struggling with ill health, in particular our brother Abdullah Abbas, grant them complete shafa. Oh Allah, for all those mu'mineen who are with us until last Muharram and are no longer with us, raise their ranks in Jannah. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time. Allow us to enter Jannah alongside him under his banner. ربنا تقبل منا